is to look for repeat words. If you notice as you're reading through or when you're using your voice test that you're repeating a lot of words, especially in rapid succession, then take that word and also do a control F search on your word processor, because what we tend to do if we're not really clear on how we're writing or we're writing really fast is just repeat ourselves over and over and over again. That's not fun to read. It kind of throws us out of whatever experience we're reading. So make sure you do that quick test to see if you're repeating words. And if you are, then go ahead and choose a different word that means the same thing. You can either search for a thesaurus and see if there's a better way to say it, or reword the sentence so that you're not using that same word. The next thing and the last thing is something you see a lot in verbal speech, but is not so much in writing, which is transitions. It makes it easier to read if you're saying something like anyways, or moving on, or however, or with, or but, or also, or, those things like or even, where you're showing that a new thought is starting, but it's related to the old thought. And it's just one of those copywriter hacks to keep people dragging down the page and listening to what you have to say, because there's this open loop. There's this little buzzing in the back of their mind that says, okay, a thought has yet to be completed. I can't stop yet now. Using those transitions frequently is going to allow your reader to continue to believe that there's more stuff below that they really need to figure out. The third part of the thorough editing checklist is attention grabbers. Once you've gone through formatting and once you've gone through clarity, this is where you can start to punch your copy back up again, grabbing the attention of the reader and inserting things that keep their attention where previously you were trying to figure out ways to make sure their attention didn't wander due to simple fixes in writing. One way to do that is cliffhangers. If you notice that there's a piece of your copy where you have to explain something, and that thing might be a little bit more boring than normal, or something that a person might not be interested in as much in the moment, you can imply that there's going to be some sort of payoff later, and that's a cliffhanger. For example, if you're saying that there are 3 ways you have to prepare your home before you sell it, that's going to be a little bit boring for someone. So you can say, and the third way is absolutely the way to get above asking. But first, we have to do the first 2. By inserting tiny little cliffhangers like that in your reading, then either it's going to make the person go further down the page and read number 3 and then skip back up to number 2, or it's going to pull them down and make them read the first 2 so they can get to number 3. Those cliffhangers keep attention. Another way to do it is by rearranging things. So as you're reading, as you're going through and editing, you're going to notice that certain thoughts may feel better in different areas of the copy. For example, maybe to use the previous example of the 3 ways to set up your house so it will sell more, maybe that particular piece of education would do better higher up because that's more in line with what the prospect wants in the beginning. Obviously, they want to sell their home for top dollar, which is why they're reading your sales letter, but maybe those 3 things need to be up higher. And then below, you're going to talk about the 3 things that they can do and make mistakes, or the 5 things that realtors can do for them. Whatever your copy is including in order to make them want to do the outcome, sometimes it's worth rearranging things to keep attention or to put the payoff up sooner so that they keep going further down in anticipation of something better. The third way to do this is bullets. Now, bullets are a copywriting trick that a lot of professional copywriters spend an inordinate amount of time on to perfect. You don't have to do that because you're busy, you're a business owner. But what you can do is use the power of a bullet, which is essentially free reading time. When you bullet something, meaning you put a number next to it or you put a dot next to it in a form of a list, it's telling the reader that this particular point is very important and worth paying attention to. So unlike the paragraph above it or the paragraph below it, your bullets typically get read much more often. And so you need to use that real estate if you need to put something powerful or something promising or something interesting in those bullets. And you can also use them to keep people's attention in a period of time where you're trying to explain something, but you need them to focus a little more. The next way to do it is with multiple calls to action. Most of your sales letters, if they're truly keeping the attention of the reader or the buyer or the prospect, will be a little bit longer because it's something interesting to them. But that doesn't mean that you can't add a call to action for whatever outcome you want earlier on in the sales letter. This is going to give the reader multiple opportunities to take action. And there are people who take action faster. Maybe they only needed to hear the one thing in order to contact you. Maybe they need to read the entire thing and go all the way to the bottom and take that call to action. But the point is, because there are different types of readers, the people who scroll, the people who read the whole thing, the people who only want to hear one thing, they need to see multiple calls to action, and it's going to be more effective and ultimately higher converting for you to have multiple calls to action in your copy. And the last thing to grab attention are closes. Now, we're going to talk about closes a little bit more in the OfferStack module, which is a bonus to this program. But closes essentially are ways that you can capture the person's attention by giving them an ultimatum or making a really clear point or making something more urgent or more scarce so that they take action. Those things grab people's attention because they seem final or they seem important. And again, we'll talk about them later, but using them in your copy is one very effective way to grab attention. The fourth thorough editing part of the checklist is to really punch up your copy. Now, this is where you've taken what you've done with attention grabbers and formatting and clarity, and now you're finally moving on to what professional copywriters like to put into their copy in order to make things just pop. The first thing is actually physically highlighting parts of your copy that need to be read or that are very important. Using highlighting is essentially a magnet for the person's eyes. So if you really have to make a point, like I am a realtor who does not take commission until the home is sold for 10% above asking. Or maybe you are an accountant and you don't charge your clients until the end of the year, but you bookkeep for 12 months. Something extraordinarily important to your sales pitch. You can highlight that, and it essentially guarantees that everyone who reached that point of the copy is going to read that piece. And very important if you need to highlight something, literally. The second thing is power words. Now, there's two ways that I would recommend that you do this. Power words are just words that people attribute more meaning to. And there's lots of different reasons to use them in lots of different types of copy. So the first thing I would tell you is to Google power words for sales copy. There's lots of articles that have been compiled for words that have more emotional impact to them that you can use if you're at a lack, or if you know that you need to stop using a certain word, or you're getting repetitive, whatever it happens to be. There's repositories all over the internet that have done the research for you. The next thing is to use a site called wordhippo.com. This is one of my favorite resources because you can go there and you can type in a word, and then you can get words that mean, or words that sound like, or words that also mean this type of search. It's going to give you a lot of really powerful words that you can use for something innocuous if you have something like that. Using power words is another way to just emphasize the emotional impact that you're trying to create with your words. The third thing is qualifier hunting. So when we type, especially if we're trying to be accurate, or if we're in a field that requires us to be accurate, like a financial field or like a medical field, we're going to put a lot of qualifiers into our copy. Things like many people, or some people, or a certain amount of people have achieved this result. By going through your copy and looking for those qualifiers, you can also find places where maybe you can make a more declarative or powerful or authoritative statement. Rather than saying some people, you might be able to say all people, if all of your clients, or if all of your prospects fit a certain type of profile. The qualifier hunting is more for you to look around and see, okay, what are some things that I've said in order to protect myself that maybe I could even punch up and be more declarative in my writing, because that's going to give you more authority when you do it. The fourth way is this I to you formula. Experts, especially professionals, tend to describe problems that are occurring to someone. And when you are describing a positive outcome for someone, then instead of using the word I, you can switch that to show them and use the word you in that positive outcome. For example, if I'm saying that, I've gotten all of my clients over 10% on asking for all the homes that I've done, even in down marketplaces, because I have done the best way of staging the home and finding the best buyers who are buying a home for more than just price. When you say that, it's good copy. You're telling them something beneficial about your service. But instead, you can flip it and go, you will get the person who has gotten 10% more asking because you will have the absolute best tricks to make people buy your home for more than you're asking due to their desire for something beyond just price. Just by switching that from I to you, you're taking your qualifications and placing them in the perspective of how they're benefiting your potential prospect. This is usable across the board. So anytime that you're talking about your benefits, you can switch that into you and really punch up the power of that because it's putting them in your shoes or in the shoes that they'll get the outcome for. The next thing is the caveat I was talking about earlier when it comes to using big words. There's a way to use technical jargon to boost your authority. Now, this is for fields where it can be very technical, and if you're a service provider that helps people with certain things, the ways to use technical jargon is to show your command of the subject matter as an authority. So, for example, if your clients are fearing something with accounting or taxes, you can use technical jargon to show that you have a mastery of that subject matter. And that way it makes them feel like they're in better hands. You don't use this to show that you're smarter than the client. You show this or use this to show that you are smarter than the problem they are experiencing. You're never trying to be smarter than them. You're trying to be smarter than the problem they're experiencing. Using technical jargon for authority is one very good way to do that. Finally, there's number 6, which is moving up answers. This is where you've read through the copy and you've realized that maybe you've buried the lead a little bit. Maybe you've said something that is really powerful and you want to move up that answer to a question or an objection sooner into the copy so that more people see it. Maybe it needs to be rearranged into a more powerful way. But as we go through sales pieces, typically we get more educated as we write because we're more clear on what we want to say. But unfortunately, the reverse is true for a person reading the ad. So when we write the first time, a lot of our good stuff is going to be at the bottom because those are our best ideas. We're more warmed up. Take those and move them up. The last thing is the so what test. This is sort of the last piece of thorough editing because what you want to do here is go through your copy and ask yourself, so what? On every statement or claim or promise or important detail. If you can't justify what you've written after saying so what, then it should probably be removed or explained a little bit more. For example, if you make a claim and you say, I'm a realtor who can get 10% more for your house, and then you say, okay, so what? And then you think to yourself, I can get 10% more for your house. And that means that not only will you never have to worry about my fee being worth it, but you're going to walk away with more money in your pocket to redecorate your next home or the moving expenses of moving everything. That's the so what test and the power behind it. Use that at the very end of your copy once you've made things clear and formatted everything and punched it up, because it's going to give you that little coup de grace on the top to make sure everything is hyper relevant for your marketplace. Here's a little bit of extra stuff as well once you've gone through the thorough editing. The first thing is to get a copy critique from an expert. Now, I encourage you to go through this thorough editing process before you ever invest in a copy critique. Because if you haven't done this thorough editing for yourself, then anything you turn into a copy editor or even a copywriter who does copywriting critiques, anything you turn into them without going through thorough editing is just going to be handed back to you with really bad feedback. Or feedback that you can't use, because you don't want to turn in a first draft. You want to turn in what you think is what you're going to turn in or create your advertisement out of, because you'll get the best feedback possible from a person who sees it with fresh eyes versus you who've been fiddling with it for days or weeks at this point. Never, ever, ever get a critique from a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group. You never want to go to a group of your peers or a group of, random people on Facebook that you have no idea about their qualifications and get a critique from your copy. That is a losing proposition. You can't verify the validity of where their expertise is coming from. You have no idea where their advice comes from. You have no idea what kind of experience they have in the industry, if any. So what I would highly recommend is just going to get a copy critique from an expert that you know and trust. The other thing is to never get a critique from your client or from your customer. So let's say if you are writing an advertisement or using some of your skill to write for a client, your client should just say, let's test what you wrote. Now, this is more applicable if you actually are a copywriter or if you're doing some sort of advertising for your client. But the point is, your client's subjective perspective on the content you've created for them should never dictate how you wrote an advertisement. They should just say, let's test it, because they trust you to have a completed project. Your customer, however, and this is more relevant when you're a business owner, should just be saying, how can I buy that? You should never ask your customer, hey, what do you think about this letter? Hey, what do you think about this webinar? Hey, what do you think about this VSL? Because they're going to want to give you feedback. They're not going to be receiving that ad in the manner that you want them to receive it. So all your customer should be saying is, how do I buy that? Or, I don't care about that. That'll let you know whether or not your copy is in the right place. That's a little bit of extra for you once you've gone through these pieces.